I think algae are very much used to replace plastics. Mycelium could also, from a similar applications. What we see right now is actually mycelium as a substitute for leather. So in really high bags and leather goods. There starting to be commercial solutions for that, and that's French luxury brand Hermes will do that, and it doesn't really get much more luxurious than that. Danish sort of responsible brand Ganni is working with that. So there's a lot of sort of within the consumer goods that are starting to happen, but also within the built environment, we already have the first commercial products within acoustics based out of mycelium, and a lot of research and development into what more could it be.
Welcome back to How We Change the World. I'm very excited about today's show because I was able to chat with a Danish expert who helps businesses befriend sustainability. Ditte Lysgaard Vind works as the Chief Innovation and Science Officer of Blocks Hub, which is a Nordic innovation hub in Copenhagen, Denmark, where businesses are working on sustainable solutions to our planetary distress. And they are nurtured and helped to succeed so they can also scale and expand. Ditte is also an author, and in the podcast, we talk about her new book titled Danish Design Heritage and Global Sustainability, which is a must-read for anyone who cares about helping our planet survive and actually thrive without harming the economy. Also in the podcast, Ditte shares her 4 R's of sustainability and talks about rethinking how we make and use everything, from the buildings that we live in, to the clothes that we wear, to the cars that we drive, to how we wash our clothes. She also reveals how Copenhagen became the world's most bike-friendly city. Oh, and just a heads up before we start, our video chat had a few internet hiccups that affected the lighting primarily. So you might notice some changes as you watch. Nothing too distracting, I promise. Thanks for sticking with us, and let's get started with an inspiring conversation with Ditte Lysgaard Vind. Hello, Ditte Lysgaard Vind, and welcome to How We Change the World podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I am very honored to have you. The topic that we're going to be discussing, which is around the topic of sustainability, protecting our planet, circular economy. These are issues that are important to everybody, no matter what their interests are, because it involves the future of our planet. So it's such an important conversation. So I'm really so happy that, as an expert, really, that you are here to join us. So. You've really, so far, you're young still, but you've devoted your career to really sustainable design and to teaching others about the importance of building a sustainable world and a circular economy, which we'll describe more about what that means. And I think the education and the doing part together really make you unique. And I, for one, am grateful to you for doing such important work. And because I think people are kind of failing to see, at least in our country, how critical and how time sensitive this issue is. So, whatever you can educate us on around that would be so helpful, just to, get things going a little faster. So to introduce you and what you do, I'll just say a couple things and I'll have you finish, but I guess I had to give you a title. It might be sustainability guru or expert. I know you're the chair of the Danish Design Council or Center. Is it Council?
Council. It's the Design Council.
Yeah. And I'll have you describe what that is. And you've written 2 books, one of which we're going to spend quite a bit of time on today, called The Danish Design Heritage and Global Sustainability, which will be a little confusing for people until they hear what it's about, but it's an incredibly powerful book, an important book. And then you also wrote this book called A Changemaker's Guide to the future. So a lot to talk about, but you also have another job. What is that?
It's Blocks Hub, which is the sort of Nordic innovation hub, whom last about 7 months ago were so wonderful to create a new position for me as the Chief Innovation and Science Officer. And for me, that's all about finding those inflection points where I can take the knowledge from being a doer and help making sure that all of the great ideas and pilot projects that we see coming up actually have the nurturing in order to scale and become the new norm.
So it's sort of a co-working space, if I'm understanding it right. Is that true? Where people all come and share the space?
There's the co-working part, but it's a physical building, but it's also the place for innovation within the built environment. I think for me, why the built environment makes so much sense and this role is such a passion is because the built environment has currently it's a key part of the problem when you look at CO2 emissions and waste streams and whatnot. But it also holds such an important part of the solution, rather it's, the building you live in, the neighborhood you're a part of, the city you're a part of, all of those things. But in order to really unlock that potential, we need to get much better at innovating and using applied science within the built environment. And that requires, first of all, for the built environment to learn new, but also almost you could say to learn. And that's the kind of double challenge that we're trying to tackle. How do we equip the built environment to be that part of the future, making sure that we unlock social value and do it so that we can create value for people, but do it while staying within the planetary boundaries. And I am hopeful that is a possible thing to do, but it is a very grand challenge.
It is a grand challenge, and you live. We didn't say this yet, but do you live in Copenhagen? I know you're Dane. I know you live in Denmark, but are you in the city?
Yes, I'm in the very center of the city.
You're really Denmark is really notable. Scandinavian countries and even Europe in general is so much more just the conversation, let alone the implementation of all these topics is so much more common, maybe surprisingly, than it is in the US. I think you've got about 5 million population. We've got about 330 some million. So we have a lot of work to do in our country because the impact in the United States is so massive. But it sounds like you're using in Copenhagen, and we're doing so many things here in the US too. I don't mean to say that we're not, but just as far as it being part of the daily conversation, I think it's much more front and center in Denmark and in other European countries than it is here. So what you're doing has really big impact, can have a really big impact on what we learn from you and what you teach us.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages that we have here in Denmark is that when you look at our design tradition, as the book does, but also our business tradition, you have so many companies that are built on, being, providing energy efficiency, providing water efficiency. Like there's a lot of business, renewable energy also being a key part. So there is very much an ability for people to imagine that people and planet and business can be friends rather than foe. And I think that's we need to start with that ability to imagine something better.
As well as individual responsibility too, which I think maybe comes in third place, but in terms of the order of things, but definitely individuals, we have to all play our part. So important there as well. So today, basically, we're going to talk about 3 main things, just so people know where we're headed. Sort of the core elements of what sustainability is and what it means to the planet and everybody and everything that lives here. how we go about creating that sustainable planet. And then we'll talk about some examples of how people are utilizing this sustainable design that you're going to be talking about around the world. And so we're going to talk about some examples in Copenhagen and China. And of course, they're all over the world, but it's good to kind of get very tangible examples so people can understand, so all of us can understand. So, and you came from a business background, which is kind of interesting and I think maybe comforting for people who are listening, that you don't have to be a scientist to understand how to apply some of these sustainable circular ideas in business.
Yeah. No, I think that's the task we have today. Science has been so good at, telling us what are the problems, what do we need to stop doing. Now we need design and business to help us shape and innovate a future so that, we can start imagining what the world might look like if we were to cater to people while staying within the planetary boundaries. That I think is what we need more than anything now.
Interesting. Let's start with a really big picture. It might seem like some heavy lifting, maybe, to get started, but you talk a lot about the Anthropocene era, which we are currently in, at least our current understanding of it, and especially how our human actions are so pivotal, right now in driving the ecological changes in the world. So can you explain what that Anthropocene means and how we're impacting it, what our impact looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two parts that are important to be mindful of there. One is that the Anthropocene is defined by that it is us as humans, our actions that affect the planet, and that affects our ability to thrive on planet Earth. So what we do affect planet, and that has an effect on us. It's not just a matter of, whether you enjoy wildlife and nature. It's truly also about how we and future generation will be able to thrive on planet Earth. That's the one side of things. The other side is also that sort of understanding that there is no business as usual when you've gone from one planetary epoch, the Holocene, to a new planetary epoch, the Anthropocene, because all of the great things that we have gotten, within the last centuries has happened within the Holocene. That was one very stable environment for human progress to thrive. And that's going to be different from now on. So rather than staying in the past, I think that there is a need and an urgency, not of course very much to mitigate climate change, but also to find that new way of being where we can thrive once again. And that will look different than what we're used to, because one, we know the effect it has on the planetary boundaries, but simply also the fact that we are in a new planetary epoch will also require that.
Do you think it's difficult? First of all, thanks for that explanation. And I'm wondering do you think that people are still having trouble accepting that this is our responsibility now? Because that's really what we mean by this Anthropocene, right? That it's up to us now. What we're doing is affecting everything. It seems it's a little bit hard for people to accept and act that way.
Yeah. I think that comes back to that importance of imagination, and how we really need design and business to step in, because you're right, we need to take individual responsibility, but I think also in terms of where we are at right now, where from an individual perspective, we're continuously told how horrible things are, which they are, they definitely are, and what we need to stop doing. But from a psychological perspective, I think we need to get much better at, rather than paralyzing people with fear, then empowering them with that ability to imagine things. And that comes from, highlighting those best practice cases, starting to have that conversation. So these, you can almost see it as small cracks of lights that starts to shine through and give way to this new way of being. Because I think, which I get it, that we need hope, but hope shouldn't be something where we're saying, oh, I'm hopeful, so I don't need to do anything. I can just wait for, technology quick fixes to do everything. No, on the contrary, hope is something we gotta earn. And hope is something that we should use as a tool for empowerment of each of every one of us.
Yeah, that was so well said. And I think hope and action kind of separates it, kind of puts that exclamation point on it, that we have hope, but that hope must be in action. We must take steps.
No, I think that one notion that I really am very inspired by that might be relevant to mention here is Christiana Figueres, the amazing woman who led the climate COP in Paris and really achieved the climate accord. She has this notion of a stubborn optimist, which I think is quite a good way of phrasing it, because being optimistic for the future is something that you need to work really hard for, because there is more than plenty of data that could leave you in a less than optimistic state. But being an optimist in order to really go out there and put your, full resources towards working for improvement of and the betterment of the world. Because, I mean, for me at least, it would be very difficult to work towards improving things if I didn't believe that was in fact possible.
Of course, that's stubborn optimism is a really, seems like an accurate term and a necessary one. I know that, we'll get into design in just a few minutes, but I think, I don't know whether it was in your book or somewhere I heard you speak, that you talk about the excitement of that, really, that we can now design things with such purpose in mind and make them. It's an opportunity to be creative with our manufacturing, with what products we use, with how we include nature. It's just such a creative time, and we have to be the most creative we can possibly be. And that's fun. I mean, can you speak a little bit about something you talk about in both an article you wrote and I think in your book as well, that what happened in Denmark after World War II and World War I, actually, and how that impacted the design?
Yeah, I think what we today sort of celebrate rightfully, in my subjective opinion, as Danish modern design, which is a very sort of form follows function, very simple, very well crafted, with great care for the materials, for the craft, for the aesthetics. That comes very much from seeing the social purpose of rebuilding after the world wars as a positive creative constraint, rather than seeing it as an annoyance or a nuisance that you had to take those things into account. That it was something that was used as a positive creative constraint, thus something that heightened the final solution, that made them more ambitious and gave a better result at the end. And I think that's something that we can really learn from today, seeing the planetary boundaries and sustainability not as something that, I think that for a while there was this sort of gut feeling that if it's sustainable, it's going to be uglier, less convenient, much more expensive. And instead sort of trying to say, okay, let's use design to question status quo. What is it actually that provides value for us? And then use design to shape those, rather it be materials, products, or systems that can create that value for us. But seeing the planetary boundaries not as an annoyance, but as something that helps us create even better solutions that we would have before. And I think the time is right for it, which is why I sort of see it a bit as a design renaissance. There's this sort of design is also at a crossroad of rather, the industry will be in service of the world breakers or be part of shaping a world that in which we can provide value for people.
Yeah, when you talked about this idea of the furniture was a pretty tangible example. This sort of using the materials. There were so few materials to use, and so they used, what wood was available, very little ornamentation, and really created some. Using furniture is such a good example because everyone kind of knows that sleek design from Scandinavian countries, and it really starts contributing to this idea, and we can move into maybe talking about what a circular economy is, what it looks like, because as you said, they built this furniture so well and with such a timeless design that it's actually becomes a free product because the person can keep it, use it their entire life, and then maybe sell it or give it to someone else to use. So essentially, it's like a free product, and that's sort of how a real sustainable world can look. So, if you want to comment on that, but also maybe lead us into what sustainability really means.
Yeah, I think that's part of that comes from a quote from one of the old craft makers from Denmark that really was one of the sort of key players, not a designer, but one of the craft makers of the important designers of the Danish modern, saying exactly that, essentially the furniture is for free because you could use it for 20 years and then you could sell it afterwards at the same or even at a higher price. It's actually the case today. But how that came to be was all about caring for the user, caring for the value that it created for the user, and thus, the craft, the material, the aesthetics, so that it had that, there's this notion which is like it's a brilliant thing when it happens. The issue is it's a very difficult thing to plan for. I'm sure everybody would love it if they could, but it's a very difficult thing. But that's aesthetic resilience. So that how do you create something that not only lasts from a durability perspective, that is of course also of key importance, but something that is desirable and continues to be desirable through cultural changes, through new generations, which is what they really achieved. And I think that care to the product and to the user is a key component of that. And that also means when we sort of move into what is sustainability and what is sustainability not, there's this, you can say, okay, sustainability, that's about taking all of the people that we have in the world and then being able to create value for them within the planetary boundaries, which is an extremely difficult task at current rate. So how can we maybe move towards some of that? I think one of the things that we can learn from the Danish design heritage is to move from a focus on exchange value. So from a design perspective, from a production perspective, less on the sort of seeing success as the amount of numbers sold, and moving more towards the use value and seeing success as the continued use of a product. So if you are a design studio, if you're a design company, if you're a designer, really seeing that success in value and not necessarily having to launch a new product every season, because the product that you've already launched continues to be of high value or perceived as high value and desired for many years and generations. I think that's really that takes high ambition and great skills, and I think we need to aspire more to that again.
Yeah, using a modern day example of that might be something like the iPhone, which you get a new model every, I don't know how often they come out, but constantly. And we really don't need new models very much, and so the driver behind that is not sustainability. The driver is kind of a very opposite example, is just pure profit without the, not to throw Apple under the bus, but this is sort of our mentality in most business now.
Yeah, no, and I think that they're a great example because Apple has a lot of sort of good innovations and initiatives from a silo perspective of sort of, we're doing something over here, we're doing something over here, and that's better than not doing anything, for sure. And I believe that from a human ingenuity perspective, it can be part of the solution but it needs to be put in the right systemic context, and again, that being use value taking precedence over exchange value, which your example of how often there's a new model and a new makeout is not the case at current, and then as long as that's the case, we can never talk about sustainability in the sort of on a company level. There can be initiatives that drive a more responsible behavior and make things less bad than they were before, but it doesn't really fit the scope of sustainability.
Yeah, it seems that maybe it depends, like a company's mission. I'm sure you're probably familiar with Patagonia, and they have literally made saving the planet, building a sustainable planet, their mission, their company mission. And they haven't lost sales because of that. People, that will drive sales because there's so many individuals who wish that they could buy clothing that did not land up in a landfill. So I think of a lot of companies, they're afraid to not come out with a new model, but the truth is they will have a broader audience if they do, if they slow it down and put the mission statement to create this world that will, because, sorry to keep going on, but if you think about a finite planet, we're going to run out of, even same with batteries for electric cars, we're going to run out of some of those raw materials that we are running out. And so it's getting harder and harder to find them. So now is really the time, or yesterday was a better time, but now is the next thing we have to plan around what we have left and to design products that way.
Yeah, exactly. And then figuring out how do you then create good business around it, right? Where there's lots of opportunities to do that. Do you start, if you're a clothing or a furniture or even, it could be the iPhone even, how big a part of your sales isn't selling a new product, but it's selling a repair part to a product, or a service of that product, so that it has that it lives longer, and you can almost sort of start having that strategy of how big a role that plays, and how that starts maybe playing just as large a part as selling something new. Or you could really take it far and move towards product as a service, as a business model. So you don't actually sell whatever you produced, you lease it. And for me, that was actually my journey into circular economy and design. In 2014, 2015, I invested into a baby clothing company called Viga, which was a product as a service business model, and it was just starting up. And then I became very active with helping them in terms of strategy and stakeholder management and stuff like that in this sort of business. And that was so interesting because when you started designing for longevity, that meant if the success of designing for longevity being can this body stocking or whatever it was be circulated 1, 2, 3 times, well, then it's going to be bad business, red numbers on the dotted line. But if you can circulate it more times, then it starts becoming really good business. So all of a sudden you actually have planet the business and the user with aligned rather than opposite incentives, which I think that's where we really need to go, so that it isn't that sustainability isn't a trade-off. It's a natural part of the business model.
Mm. Can you take that description of that company and make it a little bit more tangible for people? So, like from a consumer standpoint, so you would buy a baby outfit, for example, a jacket, let's say, and then what happens?
So in that
from a
case, you would
consumer standpoint?
actually subscribe for, as your baby grows, you have like you had a sort of a package of somewhere between 8 and 12 of the sort of essential garments. And then that cost would be at a lower price to you than you would normally need to pay to have, organic cotton and some of these really high quality materials. But the thing would be that you would then only have it for as long as your baby is in that sort of growth phase, and then you would return it and you get a new package, and that package is recirculated through different users, and we of course know that there is a lot of secondary markets for baby clothing as well, but the key thing for me there, what really was sort of the key interest, is when you, from a business perspective, start having a financial incentive to produce quality, to make sure that the use value lasts as long as possible. And that's really where we need to go, of that sort of, how do we make sustainability into being good business, so that we can have business as that true driver. And going back to what I mentioned initially from the built environment, of seeing so many great pilots, but so little scaled and becoming the new norm. I think that's a key part of the issue, right? We do something a little bit on the side, maybe also very much for the PR and the branding, but there's not really an incentive for it to be rolled out and scaled, because that would probably be a problem for existing business.
Well, it may or may not. There's also companies like Eileen. Oh my gosh, I can't think of the clothing line. Eileen. Yes, thank you. I keep wanting to say Ford for some reason. That's a great example of where they if you walk into first of all, the very simple design, not unlike the Danish design, but you can go into the store and buy a new item, and then you can return it later. And same with Patagonia. And a lot of companies are now actually doing that. But then you can always also go in there and buy used clothing. It looks brand new. So there's sort of these models that it's slowly you can buy new or used. And that I do see that seeping into more and more companies. So we're dipping our toe in it.
Yeah. And I think the cool part of that is they're making it part of their like the secondary market for their clothing. They're making that part of their business, so it becomes part of their P&L, and it starts being not something that is excluded from their business, but something that drives their business and becomes just a larger and larger part of their financials, which I think is super cool.
It is so cool. And, I went to college a very long time ago. I remember a marketing class I took where they talked about, and most people are familiar with the term planned obsolescence. So they would build, say, a washing machine or a dryer, clothes dryer, and then build it to break down. I think it's gotten shorter and shorter in those days, I think, because they can build them to last for 30 years, but they build them to last for 10 years so that they don't destroy their company with no future sales. But this is something that has also taken place. I don't know if there's any in the United States, but I know there's some European countries that are now leasing things like washers and dryers. And then you've got this incentive to build it's in the best interest of everyone to build the most durable product you can and lease it.
Exactly. And I think that goes to the core of our problem, right? But as you say, we can build something that lasts for 30 years, but we don't. So it's almost, we've used all of our human ingenuity to, reverse engineer against ourselves rather than towards our
Right.
progress and enlightenment. And I think that there's that comes from a need to systemically rewind that focus on exchange and move back to use value, because there is, as you say, many opportunities within that. It comes back to some of the business model as well. There's been some cool examples with lightnings, because for light bulbs the same has been the case. They started being able working or lasting shorter, not longer. And then there was these examples, I think it was in the Schiphol, the Amsterdam airport, where they then started not buying lamps and light bulbs, but leasing lightning, so lightning as a service from Philips. I think they're now called Signify or something. But nonetheless, that's sort of where, what is it actually that provides value? What is it actually that you want to buy? Well, for the airport, it was obvious, they needed lightning. They didn't need lamps or light bulbs that wasn't working for too long. And so by keeping it at the company, and then they had the incentive to, as you mentioned, create light bulbs that lasted much longer.
So Ditte, can we talk a little bit about how transit works in a circular or more like a sustainable economy? I know that Copenhagen is known to be the bicycle capital of the world, which, since I've been to Amsterdam, it's hard for me to imagine more bicycles in a place, but I think it's more about the design and how it works so well in your city. Can you just describe that a little bit, how that works?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think actually, given that you mentioned Amsterdam as an example, I'll start there. I think what really works so brilliantly in Copenhagen is that it's about designing infrastructure as well as the bikes and the cities around it, because I was actually in Amsterdam just recently, and you are absolutely right. There are more bicycles in Amsterdam, but they're not in use. They're taking up crazy amounts of space along the lines. It's not are people biking in Amsterdam, but I've never seen so many parked bikes in my life. Secondly, also that sort of almost a bit of sort of, the key to good biking culture is a larger mobility system that works, where you have an integration between bicycles, between pedestrians and public transportation. And I think that's also a key part of what works so well in Copenhagen, because we've been able to design city infrastructure around it and create public policy that supports it. So I think those are core things that really allows for bicycling to be the sort of, the go-to solution rather than a niche.
I see. Yeah. I'm a little curious though, because in my city of Denver in Colorado, they are definitely adding a lot. They're trying to integrate it with cars and pedestrians, as you mentioned, but it's difficult when you have it already created. So how did they go back and change the layout of how the traffic works in the city?
Well, I think there's definitely, whatever we talk about within the realm of sustainability, we need to talk about replacement also, right? And so increasing bicycling is also about reducing the use of cars. So there is definitely something with designing for more bikes and lesser cars, lesser parking frees up space for bicycles, etc. So there is a key part of that. I think the other key part of it is making sure that, when you take your bicycle, it reduces your carbon emissions, it increases your personal health and well-being, but it's also the easiest choice. And I think that's really where we should go, that the sustainable choice is the most convenient and the easy choice. And one of the reasons for that is that it's the quickest way to get around. And so that can come from taking more space to bicycles, but it's also as is also mentioned as a case in the book, creating new bridges, such as the bicycle snake mentioned in the book, where you're creating new infrastructure, but for bicycling only, where you can very easily cross the water, and you have, there's no car lanes and long queues and stuff like that. Another beautiful part of that case, it's great for Copenhagen, but in particular, it's great because now the architectural studio Disassembled has great international demand from other countries and other cities wanting similar solutions. China, as highlighted in the book, as one example, and then, of course, you move from a relatively small scale in the city of Copenhagen to a much larger scale, which is for me also where we're talking about sustainability in a Danish context becomes so interesting. If this small population of not much more than 5 million can become a test bed for solutions for the global world.
Yeah, that's that kind of refers back to what we were speaking about earlier, that you are sort of the test case, and you have the ability in Copenhagen to sort of play with things a little bit, until they're a little bit refined, because it's very difficult to do that in a country as large as China. So, and I know they came and they studied what you did and then went and implemented it, at least in the city of Xiamen. I don't know if I'm sure they'll pass that on to other cities as well. So, just for anyone listening who could have anything to do with city planning, it's really helpful to actually go and see with your own eyes how things work. But one of the things that we're challenged with in our climate, and I'm not sure how much it snows in Denmark, but what do you do in terms of really inclement weather? Because we kind of shut down here and everyone goes back to their car when the weather's not good, which is kind of frequent.
Yeah. So, right now it's spring, so I'm loving my bicycle as much as any other, but I do bike all year round, and it is the normal thing for Copenhageners to do. I'm sure that there can be crazy amounts of snow and rain, and then maybe people will move into public transportation or their cars. But all people bike all year round, because, and I think that goes to the public policy part, because for us to have a year-round biking culture, it means that there are some folks from the municipality that really has quite the work cut out in the mornings before the traffic really starts in the morning, making sure that snow is removed and all these different things, and then it's not too icy and stuff like that. So I think the key is when it snows is actually the work that the municipality puts into making sure that biking lanes are possible to use for the bikers.
Well, they do it with streets anyway, so it's really just adding a new dimension to that city work. They're out here, 2, 3, 4 in the morning clearing the streets, so why not also do the bike paths? But I don't believe that happens here, so that would be a great tip for us to pick up in other cities, I'm sure. You were talking about maybe we could go back and speak a little bit more about reducing, because you were mentioning in the concept of bicycles. You have to reduce the number of cars, and that's part of this bigger picture towards sustainability. But there's sort of a whole array of, namely 4 different ideas and suggestions that you've put into it's sort of a vernacular that are sort of examples that we can all use, those of us who aren't as comfortable with the whole subject. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about those 4 R's and how we can all be a little bit more sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it's, circular economy is a great toolbox to enable sustainable solutions. But to unpack that, what is circular economy and what are the different parts of it, and how do they relate to each other, and how do they, what is their opportunity to move us towards creating value for people while staying within the planetary boundaries? And for that, I created this model of the 4 R's. 1, and the first being to reduce. So rather it being reducing our material usage within products, reducing the amount of products we consume, reducing the amount of square meters that we might feel necessary in our homes in order to feel value. How do we use that not as something that's of if you could have more, you would have more, but as an opportunity to say, hey, can we actually use this as a creative challenge to create more value with fewer materials, fewer square meters, fewer products. So that's the first, and that's really where we're quite, really that it's a very it's a great opportunity to move us towards creating value within the planetary boundaries. The second one is then reuse. So that's when we reuse our products, pass them on, sell them, etc. And there might be a little bit of repair. There'll be some transportation, but there's no greater sort of processing. So that also keeps us quite close within delivering value within the planetary boundaries. The third one then, which adds to that, is recycling. And recycling, as opposed to reusing, is when you need to reprocess. So you're not reusing the material, you're recycling so you're not reusing the product, you're recycling the material. So in a sense, reusing the material. And that requires new processing. So most likely energy. Let's plastics, for example, you would then either mechanically or chemically recycle it and then reproduce, where you might also need to add either virgin material or other additives to regain the strength that you would want. So while being a very useful tool in terms of scaling, using waste materials, it's probably not as likely to keep us within the planetary boundaries. Reused and reduce. That said, I think it's a necessary and key part of the transformation. We just need to be mindful of which of the tools we use when. And then the fourth R, which is for me one of the things that I'm getting very excited about, which is replace. So really looking to, rather than we're talking about bicycling being a replacement for cars, that drives new value rather than decreasing our value. And one key, and I think what's really will be driving a lot of change is all of the biogenic materials, bio-based materials that are starting to commercialize. Where for me it makes sense to talk about first generation of bio-based materials. So wood would be a key example of that. But from a US perspective, you guys were leading, and Henry Ford in particular, with using hemp and realizing what a great material hemp was. Then there were some political issues, and hemp is also used. There's similarities to cannabis and stuff like that. So we kind of we forgot about it for quite a while, but now we're starting to use hemp as a really value-adding material again. Product.
And we lost 100 years. Waiting for that to come back into favor. So these little mistakes can really cost us dearly.
Exactly.
They're not mistakes, even intentionality.
And then from that, so that's the sort of, that represents the first generation, what we currently see within bio-based materials. Then there's this next generation of bio-based materials where we really are taking, in my perspective, the best from nature and combining it with our human ingenuity. So bioengineering, which could be about, algae, mycelium would be two key examples of that. Where we've just scratched the surface of what is possible to do, but much more to come in the future, and where we can learn so much from other industries. Here in Denmark, we have a very strong life science sector, and so all of those learnings they have on bioengineering, using our human ingenuity in collaboration with nature's power and knowledge, rather than seeing them as opposites. I think that will just be an area where we're going to see so many interesting innovations that's almost unimaginable for us at current.
Well, and plants have evolved over thousands and thousands of years and learned how to repel water and learned how to do these different things that we're always seeking to do with new products. So, can you talk? I know you mentioned earlier about mycelium. That's used, for example, in plastic or to replace plastics. Is that right? Or possibly will be.
I think algae are very much used to replace plastics. Mycelium could also, from a similar applications. What we see right now is actually mycelium as a substitute for leather. So in really high bags and leather goods, they're starting to be commercial solutions for that, and that's French luxury brand Hermes will do that, and it doesn't really get much more luxurious than that. Danish, a sort of responsible brand, Ganni is working with that. So there's a lot of sort of within the consumer goods that are starting to happen, but also within the built environment, we already have the first commercial products within acoustics based out of mycelium, and a lot of research and development into what more could it be, isolation material, even load-bearing structures built from mycelium. So I think that when we're not at a point in time when we're building with mycelium as load-bearing, but there's definitely research that's ongoing. I imagine, as right now it's niche research projects, but as we really, from a societal perspective, start to seeing the great opportunity and the need for it, I think things can progress really very fastly.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting. That's hugely exciting, especially when you talk about plastics and avoiding that and all the other problems that we're experiencing and with PFAS and everything. It's just that's a hugely exciting field. I'm kind of laughing because did you actually come up with these fours? Are you the person who kind of initiated that?
With the 4 R's?
Yeah, 4 R's.
Yes. I mean, there's a lot that it's. I think that's the part about innovation. It always happens, many things on top of each other. So, I think there's the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has these 6 R's, but then there's something with renewables and stuff like that. So, yes, putting replace as part of it and highlighting these 4. That's my my doing. But of course, building on so many others.
Sure.
Always does, right?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm kind of laughing because about 5 years ago, I put a meme on I had a website called Sustainable World Training, and I put this meme that showed these 4 things, and it was exactly what you are describing, these 4 R's. So I did not know of course, until I just met you. So I didn't realize that was yours, but it's so amazing because this is, I think, maybe this was quite a while ago, right? Like a few years ago that you...
But then it must have been someone else, because this I created for me, like that's, framing the toolbox like that is maybe years ago or something. So it goes to show that there's so many working within different spheres at the same time. But I haven't
Well, it's interesting because I just wanted to say that it kind of shows you it is the most shared. This has been so many years ago that I posted. Maybe it's 2020. I can't remember what year it was. I'll try to find it. But everyone has reposted that. I just still get all these things at this point. What is this post? It keeps getting, and every time I go back and see it, it's that one. So just to emphasize how much people are eager for this. It's nothing that we have to force on people. It's a better way of living for all of us.
Yeah, we just need to make it relatable and help people, help build that bridge towards making it imaginable.
Yeah, it's it's so exciting to think that we're moving pretty quickly into that direction. Yeah. All right. Well, if you could maybe just leave us with some parting words or parting thoughts about how individuals and businesses, because actually businesses are just people, right, doing things together, how we can maybe embrace this a little bit more and find ourselves like what type of steps or mindsets that we could develop that would allow us to maybe not fight this anymore, but maybe embrace it and start showing up in our own lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, something that helps me is this notion of not letting perfect get in the way of good. So every step we take is better than no steps. So getting started, getting our work on, and really learning as we go along is for me a key part of it. Secondly, I think that embracing and helping each other embrace and carrying and nurturing each other in terms of with what is needed at that speed, at that scale, that level of ambition. Failure is a necessary part of the journey towards success. So how do we allow for ourselves and each other to fail as part of that journey, and then learn from that and build upon it going forward? And I think that's something that we need to really help each other embrace, so that we can be ambitious, so that we dare to try things, to set audacious goals, even though we don't know how to achieve them, and, continuously try, fail, succeed, hopefully at the end, but allowing for that trial and error and moving. For me, a key part of my journey, and I'm very enriching, but also where I can see that I really moved towards having impact was, coming from the realm of consultancy, where everything was delivered within, the Microsoft Office realm and world of that, rather a PowerPoint or document. And there's still plenty of room for that. But allowing for, real world testing, taking it to users, working with them, getting tangible in the tool shop. I think having the courage to do that is such an important part, and something that we really need to help each other, so that we allow and dare to do that.
Yeah, I love how you phrase that and characterized it, because failure is always looked at so poorly, but it's the only way that we ever really progress. And and I think in the way of individual, and I think you're alluding a little bit more to businesses there, but for me, it's in my own life, it's been so easy, and it actually makes me feel so good to just do those first 2 R's, which are reduce and reuse. I mean, we can do that every day. People go through paper towels like they're nothing, and they get mad if they come into my home and I say, no, here's a towel. It's hard for people to make that adjustment, but once you feel so much better when you just reduce what you use and reuse what you can.
Yeah, if you think about it, with reducing it, there's a lot of mental clutter from continuously having to have new things. There's a lot of physical clutter from it. So I think that there's opportunity and value to be had, and well-being, if we're able to move away from that exchange value focus.
Yeah, and teach our children to do the same. All right. Well, I think that's about out of time, but I just really appreciate so much your wisdom and your knowledge, and that you're taking the time and sharing it with all of us, because we really have so much to learn from you. And I would really encourage people to click on some of the links I'll put in the show notes, whether they're talks you've given or articles you've written, or really buy your book, because it's very accessible to everyone. It's Danish Design Heritage and Global Sustainability, and I'll have links on that in the show notes as well. So best of luck in all that you're doing, which is truly a lot. And maybe we can catch up in a year or so and see how things have progressed. It might be kind of fun to hear updates in the field and get another shot of inspiration from you.
Yeah, that would be great. And thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for hosting the podcast and allowing for all of these conversations.
I think they're important, so I appreciate that you appreciate it. So, all right, take care, and we'll be in touch.
Great. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.